Hey members, very welcome to the weekly meeting of the DAERA committee. We're using the hybrid format. We're in room 30 here, and our members are coming in by distance. We have a quorum, and if you have any issues with Starleaf, you can let us know. But I think everything's okay. And I want to advise members that the meeting will be recorded and broadcast through Parliament buildings and online. And you can use your mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and muted. I do have an apology in from Claire Bailey, who will be coming in later on. And Patsy has sent us an apology that he will also be coming in probably inside the next hour. Item number 2 is chairperson's business. There is a record of the meeting that we had with the US Embassy, and it's in the pack. Members, you're aware that the Deputy Chair and I, along with the Clerk of the Committee, attend a meeting with delegates of the American Embassy, the UK and Ireland to discuss a range of matters relating to climate change. This was on the 28th of September. A memo has been provided at page 5 of your pack. Are you okay to note the memo? Okay. Okay, members, item number 3, draft minutes from the 30th of September at page 10. Can I seek agreement for the minutes? Yeah, I'll sign them. Item number 4, matter arising. We have 2 matters arising from last week's meeting. The Clerk's memo, extension of the committee stage on climate change number 2 bill. A members' briefing memo by the Clerk and a draft motion to extend the committee stage of the climate number 2 bill to the 4th of February are included in the packet pages 21 and 23 respectively, and this is to enable us to get our committee report done. And our members contend that in order to complete a robust scrutiny of the bill, the committee requests an extension for committee stage to the 4th of February and lays a motion with the business office accordingly. Okay, members. Clerk memo COP26. Nick, do you want to provide an update on the COP26?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. So, members on members on page 24 of your pack is just a very brief memo on an update of the activities that we had discussed a number of weeks ago in order to mark the COP26 conference. So, as agreed, we had submitted a request on behalf of the committee to illuminate Parliament buildings on the 1st of November. That request has been approved by the Assembly Commission, and so the buildings will be illuminated in green on the 1st of November, which is the first day of the conference. The other activity that we had planned was to run an event with Sustrans on the 10th of November, which is the transport-themed day of the COP26 programme, to facilitate a demonstration of e-bikes and really to discuss the active travel programme as promoted by Sustrans. We have extended an invite for this event to members of the Health and Infrastructure Committees also. So organisation of that event is well underway, and the proposed timetable for the event is as follows. At 10 o'clock, there would be a presentation from the Sustrans Executive Director team to committee members on their active travel programme and the various initiatives that Sustrans partakes in to encourage e-travel. And then from about 10:45 there would be a 45-minute trial of electronic bikes for committee members, and that would include training and support from one of their instructors, and then a ride through the Stormont Estate, and it would also give the opportunity for members to ask questions, and obviously there would be an opportunity for photographs and media content arising from the event. And thirdly, the committee had requested that we look at the option of facilitating an event with either youth or school groups. So through liaison with the Assembly's Education Service, we have tentatively scoped the possibility on Thursday the 4th of November for the committee members to engage in a question and answer session with a number of schools on the concept of climate change and the importance of COP26. And we have very kindly received feedback, confirmed feedback from Cullibackie College, St Patrick's College, Dungannon and Ulidia Integrated College in Carrickfergus that they would be willing and keen to participate in that. And Banbridge Academy also hope to participate. So the proposal would be on Thursday the 4th of November in the afternoon for about 45 minutes at 2 o'clock via Microsoft Teams. We could arrange that Q&A session. And the proposed format would be a short introduction and hello from our chairperson, and then we would have a pupil nominated from each school to present for 5 minutes on their class's work and what they've been learning in relation to climate change. And then we would open it up to around 30 minutes of a question and answer session with committee members, really to give the pupils an opportunity to hear the committee's views on the importance of climate change. So members are asked to consider those proposed arrangements, and if the committee is content, we'll proceed to finalise those and get them confirmed in the diary.
Chair, can I just say, I look forward to the electric bike event, and I just want to commend to the event that was done last week with the hydrogen bus. That was good to see and see how it worked and get a look around it with the committee. Thank you.
Can I also suggest maybe that we could synergise that into like a press release from the committee?
Certainly, Chair.
Okay, that? They got into like a press release from the committee?
There was a picture taken with the committee with the bus, so that could be used too.
That could be accompanied with it, couldn't it? Members be free to use the same press release for local papers as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Nick. That's a good range of events and interaction. Thanks for organising. Okay, and we'll get a draft press release as well for consideration, Nick. Okay. Okay, members, item number 5 on the agenda, the written briefing. The edible crabs, undersized amendment regulation, and SL1, the edible crabs conservation regulations, NI 2021. The proposed SL1s are at pages 27 and 73 of the pack. The Department has written to the committee outlining its intention to bring forward 2 items of secondary legislation to enhance the protection and conservation of crabs. The undersized regulations propose to change the minimum landing size of brown edible crabs from 140 to 150 millimetres. A recent survey carried out by the Department of State indicates generous support for this change. The Conservation Amendment seeks to prohibit the deliberate declawing of brown crabs that are caught in order to mitigate harm and to facilitate the proposed increase in minimum landing size. Members, if any questions on the proposed SL1s, if you just check the thing here, proposed SL1s, and do want to advise that the clerk that we're broadly content in principle. Maybe one of the things that I might want to ask Nick, if that's possible, see in the case of the south of Ireland, the 140 mil may still apply. Probably still applies, and you would have situations, for example, in Lough Foyle and other places where the 2 jurisdictions meet, and just I suppose you want to maybe avoid a situation where people out fishing, fishermen and women, you don't want to fall foul of legislation, So maybe could that be clarified in relation to, areas such as Lough Foyle or Carlingford, where you'd have Lough Foyle is actually disputed territory. So I think it would be useful just to get some clarification in relation to avoid fishermen falling foul of legislation or on either side. Okay. Okay, members. Can we also ask the committee rights to the Fishermen's Federation, the North Coast Shellfish Fishermen's Association, and the North Eastern Lobster Cooperative to seek their views in the proposal? Is that okay? Okay. And could also give an update on the Lough Neagh fishing net issue as well that we spoke about previously, Nick?
Certainly, Chair.
Okay. Okay, members, item number 6, written briefing, consultation on the single-use carrier bags, charges regulation NI. The members will know that there is to do with the increasing the price from 5p to 25p. The briefing paper from the departments is page 118. Summarises the responses to public consultation on the proposed changes to the levy for single-use carrier bags. There are 531 responses to the department's consultation, and the overwhelming majority of respondents feel that the current levy has been effective in reducing the use of plastic bags, and that if the levy was increased, people would be further discouraged from buying them. Based on the response, the department intends to bring forward legislation to increase the levy charge on single-use plastic bags to 25p for a period of 5 years. The revenue generated from this levy will continue to be used to support environmental projects. The department indicated that the Minister would welcome the committee's comments on the proposed policy. Do members have anything that they'd like to raise in relation to this here?
Sure, just say, I mean, from 5p to 25p, there's a lot of people, if they're sort of caught short, will pay the 5p, but 25p that's a fairly large amount if you're doing regular shops, and I think it certainly would put a lot more people off. It could make an even bigger difference. That'll be my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, John?
If I could just add to that, I think Harry made a very valid point there, and I think we're all agreed that the action on the use of single-use bags, particularly plastic carrier bags, was necessary. Obviously, the less use there has been of those over the period of time, the less money has been returned to the fund available for environmental projects. So the increase in price of the purchase of the bag will then assist in increasing the amount of money available to environmental projects.
Yeah. Members, any other comments you want to make?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Rosemary?
Chair, can I come in for a moment?
Rosemary,
Yeah. I would be inclined to agree with the other two speakers in relation from the 5p to the 25p. We're listening to price increases all the time, and this huge hike from 5 to 25p, I think we need to question. Perhaps something in between 5 and 25.
Okay. Philip?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of it is to discourage people from using single-use plastic bags. So I completely understand. I mean, I know in the south it's 25 euros. I mean, I'm not sure if there's any major issues with that. Or 25 cents, sorry. 25 euros will be very, maybe what it caused for concern. But I mean, obviously the policy objective is to reduce the number of single-use plastic bags. I mean, I totally concur with that. If this kind of increase is working and has worked elsewhere, then I see no reason why we shouldn't implement it here.
Yeah. William? William? You're cutting out, William.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I think we want to discourage the use of plastic bags as much as possible, and to do that, I think you need to make it as difficult as possible. You know, if these bags are very cheap, well, people are just going to continue using them. You know, I think that's. I have no real issue with. I believe, we need to discourage as much as possible the use of them.
Yeah. Okay. So the clerk has noted those comments, which will be forwarded to the department. So, okay, members.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I just clarify for members that based on those comments that we write to the department, suppose in principle supporting the increase in the levy and on the basis that it would seem to discourage the use of purchasing single-use carrier plastic bags, but seeking assurance on why the decision was made for a 5-fold increase from 5p to 25p. Is that what the committee would wish?
Members okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Good stuff. Okay, members, that's item 6. So, members, we're moving on now to item 7. That is an oral briefing, Finn's Law, Animal Welfare Service Animal Bill. The Department Summary Report on responses to a consultation is at page 145. I want to welcome by Starleaf Neil Gartland, Director of Animal Health and Welfare Policy, and Christopher Andrews, Animal Identification and Welfare Branch. And I'd like to invite the officials to brief the committee, and then members will want to ask some questions. So you're very welcome, Neil and Christopher. You're muted. Now maybe that's... you're,
oh, sorry,
yeah,
Chair.
We got you now, Neil. Yeah, we got you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. As the Chair has mentioned, I am Neil Gartland, Director of Animal Health and Welfare Policy Division. I'm joined this morning by Christopher Andrews, Head of Welfare Policy Branch. In advance of the meeting, committee members have been provided with a paper that sets out the views of the public and stakeholders on the proposal to introduce what is commonly referred to as Finn's Law in Northern Ireland. And I appreciate the opportunity this morning to provide the committee with an overview of the consultation findings and provide an update on the proposed way forward for the policy and the legislation required. I know that members will have received written briefing, including how it operates, the bill, in other parts of the UK. Nevertheless, it may be helpful if I begin by saying a little about the background to this policy and the proposed legislation. Finn was the police dog who in 2016 in England was unfortunately stabbed while on active duty. Finn's attacker could have been prosecuted for causing unnecessary suffering under Section 4 of the Welfare of Animal Act 2006. At that point in time, it is important to state that the maximum penalty in England for this offence was a 6-month prison sentence. By contrast, Northern Ireland increased the penalties for inflicting unnecessary suffering on animals in 2013, meaning that a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison would have been available here. However, a common feature of animal welfare legislation across the UK is the need to take into account a range of factors before the court decides whether that suffering is considered to be unnecessary. Those factors include whether actions taken against the animal are done so for the protection of a person, property or another animal. This provision allows defendants to argue that they are justified in applying force against a service animal when on active duty in order to defend themselves, thereby rendering the suffering necessary. Indeed, this was one of the considerations taken into account in England when the decision was made not to prosecute Finn's attacker for causing unnecessary suffering to Finn under the 2006 Act. Instead, the Crown Prosecution Service believed it would be better to pursue charges under criminal damage legislation, which in essence treated Finn as a piece of police property. There was considerable public and political discourse and discontent around how Finn had been treated, and a high-profile campaign was launched which culminated in the Animal Welfare Service Animals Act 2019 in England and Wales. This act there aimed to provide that whether someone caused harm to a service animal, someone causing harm to a service animal was protecting a person, property or another animal, that reason or that safeguard is to be disregarded when considering whether or not the harm was unnecessary. Similar provision was also made in Scotland in the Animals and Welfare Protection and Power Scotland Act 2020, which came into force in November 2020. In Northern Ireland, the campaign to introduce Finn's Law here began in April 2018. At that juncture, the Department made it clear that this was a matter that required a Minister and an Assembly to consider. Indeed, it could be argued that in any other circumstances, this particular piece of legislation would have been made given the widespread support from a range of political parties and that which can be seen from the responses to the most recent public consultation here to discuss with you this morning. Following the resumption of devolved government here in January 2020, Alex Eason MLA and Pam Cameron MLA tabled a motion in the Assembly calling for legislation similar to Finn's Law to be introduced here. The motion was debated at length and agreed by the Assembly on the 10th of February 2020, receiving cross-party support. Since taking up post, Minister Poots has made it clear that implementing Finn's Law is a priority for this mandate, and consequently the Department launched a public consultation on the 17th of June 2021. The consultation proposed that added protection should be given to service animals used by the PSNI, the Northern Ireland Prison Service, the Belfast Harbour Police, the Belfast International Airport Constabulary and the Ministry of Defence Police. As well as this list, the power will also apply to a service animal under the control of any person exercising the powers of police constable or providing a service under the direction of the police. I would like to draw members' attention to the last provision and provide some explanation about what this power would mean. For example, the PSNI do not own search and rescue dogs. Instead, when the PSNI are directing a search and rescue operation, they bring in specialised dogs from external organisations. Creating a power that extends protection to any animal working under the direction of a constable means that search and rescue dogs will be afforded the same protections as a police animal when working alongside the PSNI. To ensure that critical legal safeguards are maintained, it is proposed that the added protection should only be afforded to those service animals when, as mentioned, they are on active duty. That is, where they are under the control of an officer and being used by that officer in the course of their duties in a way that is reasonable. The consultation also proposed that the department should have the power in the future to add to the list the animals that are to be provided with enhanced protection under the proposed legislation. The proposals made by the department align with the changes introduced in other parts of the UK. The consultation closed on the 11th of August, and by then 47 responses had been received from a range of organisations, including the PSNI, the Prison Service, the Search and Rescue Dog Association, and a number of welfare organisations, in addition to 3 local councils. The majority of the respondents were individual members of the public. Chair, members have already been provided with a copy of the consultation response and a covering letter setting out the key findings. Therefore, I propose I do not go into detail on these findings here. Rather, the findings can be discussed during the question and answer session. However, I'm very pleased to say that almost 98% of respondents were in favour of the proposals as set out in the consultation. One area where I do believe it would be useful to provide some additional information and context is the level of penalties to be imposed for attacking a service animal. The consultation document proposed that the penalties imposed for attacking a police dog should mirror the penalties already available for inflicting unnecessary suffering on any protected animal. That is an unlimited fine or a custodial sentence up to 5 years. It was quite apparent from the consultation responses that most of the organisations who responded, including the USPCA, Northern Ireland Companion Animal Welfare Group, Dogs Trust, the Kennel Club, Focus on Animal Law, supported these current penalties. However, members of the public who responded were in favour of much tougher penalties and sentences. Members will be aware that offences and penalties are not a matter where DAERA can act alone to make recommendations or set direction, and any changes to animal welfare penalties would require further detailed consideration in cooperation and conjunction with the Department of Justice and a separate public consultation. However, the department is very conscious of the strength of feeling on this matter as outlined in the consultation responses. Given the advanced state of the mandate, we recommended to our Minister that efforts are focused on ensuring that service animals are provided with that added protection as soon as possible. There is the potential that any amendments to the bill at this stage to deal with additional penalties or any other matter raised by respondents would delay the introduction of the bill to the Assembly, and this would make the timetable for the bill even more pressurised. Indeed, Chair, the Minister has written to you to indicate his desire to use the accelerated passage procedure for this bill. In his letter, the Minister sets out his view that the bill is uncontroversial and proposes simple amendments to the Welfare of Animals Act which mirror the changes in place in other parts of the UK, and the view that there's nothing in the bill which could be classed as contentious, novel or repercussive. By seeking accelerated passage for the bill, the Minister hopes to ensure that Finn's law is enacted without delay and within the lifetime of the Assembly. Chair, returning to the issue of sentencing on welfare offences, some respondents provided a view that the courts rarely apply the maximum sentence available for unnecessary suffering, that is the full 5 years. And I can advise that in response to that, the Minister has noted the views of respondents on penalties and as a consequence has written to the Minister of Justice. In his letter, the Minister highlighted the breadth of penalties currently available to the courts in animal welfare cases and asked Minister Long to consider raising the matter with the Lord Chief Justice who oversees judicial sentencing guidelines and training for the judiciary. In conclusion, I hope that I've been able to provide the committee with an overview of the consultation findings and the policy intent of the Service Animals Bill. As outlined, I have Christopher Andrews here with me today who will have a key role in progressing the bill forward. We're happy to discuss any points you may have or questions to raise about the consultation or draft of the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. I'm going to move over to John Blair. John?
Being muted.
Yeah, we've got you, John.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Neil, for presenting that, and Christopher for joining us also. I'm supportive of the bill and the measures taken by the Minister in relation to this, and took the opportunity, as I shared with some colleagues a moment ago, to visit some police dogs and dog handlers on Tuesday of this week in my role as a policing board member. I'm keen to know, though, Neil, was there direct consultation done with the PSNI in relation to the resource required to do this and how it will be developed through the policing structures across the jurisdiction? And if that hasn't been done at this stage, can it be done so that people are ready to go on this as best as possible when the legislation comes into place?
Yep, John, thank you very much, and I'll bring in Chris in a second. But in terms of the bill, it's not necessarily that there'll be any proactive resource required to implement it. You know, this is a reactive aspect. If a service dog that is attacked and is deemed to be unnecessary, and bear in mind that service dog has to be on active duty in the control of an officer and used in a reasonable way, then that adds added protections for that service animal, in which the person cannot claim that it was self-defence. And of course, at that point, that will be taken through the PSNI and the Public Prosecution Service. So there's a resource need at that point should the animal be attacked while on active duty. But in the meantime, until, and I hope that doesn't happen, you know, it's a hope that the bill wouldn't be needed. It won't create any further resource, and the police did respond to the consultation, were supportive of it, but we're happy to engage with them on that point, of course.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Harry?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Neil and Chris, for coming along. First of all, say I'm very happy for it to proceed. I think it's very good, and keep it moving. And just wondering, what other categories of animal the department would foresee coming under the protection of the legislation in the future? Have you heard any other?
If I may, it's not proposed that we add any more categories of animal at present, but I think, as Neil has noted and you're referring to, there is the provision, a pretty broad provision in the bill to add animals and under the control of agencies and so on as necessary. That will be done on the basis of evidence supplied to the department, and it will be done via secondary legislation, which will be affirmative legislation. So therefore, the committee would have an oversight role. I'm not overly sure of any animals that are left out at the moment. We are aware that our own department, for example, does use dogs at ports and airports to deal with, for example, maybe concealed products coming into Northern Ireland. So there would be a provision within the bill there to add those dogs if there was evidence presented that those dogs had been attacked and needed to be protected in the course of their duty.
Yep, that's good. It's good that provision's made. Yep, that's all. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can I ask, Neil or Chris there, obviously, you know, this is a legislation which we'd be supportive of, but I'm also thinking, seeing situations where a service handler, through accident or design, would act inappropriately and instruct a dog, or by accident or by design, as I said, to actually attack a person. What's in the legislation there to protect the victim effectively in those circumstances?
Yeah, Chair, there's a provision under 51A2 in the bill. It means that the handler has to be shown to be acting reasonably. So if I could just sort of refer to my notes, is so long as the animal is under control of the relevant officers. Firstly, the animal has to be under control. It can't be out of control. That's the first test. And then the animal has to be used by an officer on their duties in a way that is reasonable. So those are the two safeguards under 51A2 of the bill.
And who would determine or oversee that there?
That will be up to the prosecuting authority, and then obviously the PPS to determine that those tests had been met. So if the animal was being used recklessly, if it wasn't deemed to be under control, or it was believed, or there was reason to believe that the handler was instructing the animal in some sort of malicious fashion, we would hope that those tests wouldn't be met, and that would be picked up either by the agency taking the prosecution or the PPS themselves.
And what legislative protections are in place in the south of Ireland and across the EU?
In the south of Ireland, there's no similar protection for service dogs. There is, of course, the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013, which does contain a provision about causing unnecessary suffering to protected animals, and that's broadly similar to our existing Welfare of Animals Act. So there would be provision under that piece of legislation in the south to protect animals, and that carries a 5-year sentence and up to a maximum of €250,000 fine. So I think in the south it would be up to the authorities there to try and invoke that broader provision in their act, whereas what we're moving to is a very specific provision.
Thank you. Rosemary? Rosemary?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now, Rosemary, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask the question. Many of these dogs, when they're not on duty, live with their owners in a family situation or at their homes. What's the situation if those dogs are maliciously hurt by someone when they're living at the home of the owner?
Rosemary, currently our figures would show there's 64 dogs in the PSNI at present and 44 in the prison service, and many of those would live at home with handlers. If a dog is maliciously attacked while at home, it's not on active duty. It is not in the control of a handler, not being used in a reasonable way in terms of on the active duty point. That person could be prosecuted for unnecessary suffering under the welfare of animal legislation that we currently have. So it wouldn't apply in terms of this aspect where they could claim self-defence, or they could claim that they were engaging with the animal as a way to protect property or not an animal, because that animal would not be on active duty. So they were prosecuted under the normal welfare legislation, and the councils would take that forward and proceed with the PPS.
Okay, so it wouldn't apply under this act, but it would be under normal council legislation. So there is still protection for the dog. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, William.
Unmute himself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, just to say I'm broadly supportive of the bill. I have no issue. In relation to the consultees, was there any negativity in relation to consultees, or were the consultees all mainly in support of it?
William, most were.
Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. No, go ahead, Chris.
Yep. Apologies for cutting across the Neil. There was one individual who indicated that they were not not content with any of the provisions of the bill. Now that individual in their response revealed or stated quite clearly that they were opposed to animals being used in this way by any agency. So it was a fundamental objection to animals being used as service dogs, rather than anything technically wrong with the bill. They opposed all the provisions across the board because they don't want animals used in these rules.
Okay. That's okay, thank you.
And I suppose finally, I don't have any other members down here. Have you, this was straddled into the Justice Department as well. Have you any specific engagement with the Department for Justice in respect to this legislation?
Chris, I'll let you go. You're doing all the engagement on that point.
Yes, there was pre-engagement with the Department of Justice. So there was engagement, Chair, around offences and penalties, and the thrust of the policy as well was also shared with the Minister of Justice prior to the consultation going live. So there's been good engagement behind the scenes with DOJ officials and on a minister-to-minister basis.
Thank you very much for that there. And I don't have any other members who wish to ask any questions. So, Christopher and Neil, I want to thank you for taking time out this morning to brief us and take questions from the committee members. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, members, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Take care now. Okay, members, please note that the related letter from the Minister, page 139 in the pack, outlining his intention to bring forward, subject to executive approval, a request to the Assembly for use of accelerated passage to introduce the Animal Welfare Service Animals Bill on the grounds that its overarching purpose is to put in place enhanced safeguards for service animals reflecting protections in our jurisdictions. The overwhelming majority of respondents to the Department's consultation were in favour of the proposals, 98%. The bill isn't controversial or contentious. The introduction of these safeguards has been debated previously in the Assembly with strong cross-party support. The Minister has offered to brief the committee on the bill, and his intention is to bring forward a request for accelerated passage. Members will be aware that the use of accelerated passage should only be used in exceptional circumstances and subject to approval of a motion in the Assembly on a cross-party basis, obviously because it takes away from our scrutiny. So, have members any thoughts on this? Do they want to get the member to give briefing to the committee, further briefing to the committee on it? Are you content for accelerated passage? What's the view of the committee? Okay, members. So, members. We can. Suppose we have a choice. We can write to the Minister outlining that the committee wouldn't obstruct a request for the use of accelerated passage, or we can invite the Minister to brief the committee. Have members? Do members want to indicate what their thinking is on it? Try and get a consensus around it. Sorry, Philip.
I think broadly speaking, I think the committee has no issues with this. So why should we hold it up?
Okay, Thank you, William. Philip?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it has been debated. It does seem non-controversial, but I mean, it is accelerated passage. I mean, I think, I'm not sure if we should maybe invite the minister solely for this purpose, but if, I mean, there's a lot of issues coming up. I'm not sure if we have the minister coming to the committee at any point over the time ahead. Perhaps it could be raised in conjunction with other issues. I mean, it would be good to see the minister at the committee. I mean, there is an awful lot of issues happening at the minute. So, I think just given the role of the committee, that the minister is asking for accelerated passage, that we should potentially tie it in with a visit from the minister to the committee.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Yes, Harry?
Put a queue on the WhatsApp there, but thank you anyway. No, I just think I would just be quite happy respect that, Philip, but I would be concerned maybe that waiting on a ministerial visit to the committee, depending when that would be, it could slow up accelerated passage, maybe without need. I mean, I'm not meaning to go against what you're saying, but just that would be my concern, if that's okay. I'd be content with it to proceed now, and I don't see any reason to delay, but depends on the other members. Thank you.
Okay. So, members, what do we indicate we're okay for it to accelerate passage and for it to be included in the next briefing when the minister comes to the committee? Is that what we're saying, or what? Anybody else any other views on it? Rosemary?
Yeah, I would be content to proceed with accelerated passage, and certainly maybe when the minister comes to the committee we can question him. But at the moment it has cross-party support, and I think we can see it has been actually supported very much by the public also. So I would proceed with accelerated passage.
Okay. Okay, we've got, I think, the content to proceed with accelerated passage, and also to have this included in the briefing with the minister comes at the earliest opportunity for a briefing which includes this particular item.
Chair.
Yes, Philip?
I mean, I understand what others are saying, but I mean, the minister has indicated his acceptance of coming before the committee to discuss this, so it might be worthwhile, seeing if he can come. I mean, there's no point in coming to the committee to talk about this after accelerated passage has passed. So, I mean, I'm only going on the basis that the minister's looking for accelerated passage. Whilst there's no issues, I still don't think that there's any harm in quizzing the minister on it, and he has indicated his willingness to come before the committee. So perhaps we should go back to him and say, yes, we would like to come to discuss this, and use that as an opportunity to get an update on the many other issues that are happening and ongoing at this minute in time.
Okay. You, Philip. John?
Chair, yeah, as other members have said, I have no issue at all with the accelerated passage. It's clearly supported by the five main parties, at least in the Assembly, and I think others when this was debated. I have no issue with at all in inviting the Minister, but I think that the accelerated passage can continue, and we can then get an update from the Minister on progress and discuss the other issues.
Okay. So, what are we at now? So, is it possible to get that update? Maybe get that update from the minister, and also continue with accelerated passage. Philip or Nick?
Chair, thank you. Chair, just to clarify, based on the comments made by members, is the committee content that the committee would write to the minister outlining in principle the support, in principle that it wouldn't obstruct a motion brought forward for accelerated passage, but the request that the minister arrangements be made for the minister to attend the committee as soon as possible to provide a brief on a range of issues, including on the update and progress of Finn's Law and the rationale for accelerated passage. And if that is the case, could I perhaps suggest that if members have specific issues that they would indeed like to raise with the Minister as part of that wider oral briefing, it'd be very useful to have those listed out so that we could include them in that invitation letter, if that would be possible, Chair.
Members okay with that? Members okay?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. We'll get that. I'm sure if we have to do it remotely to facilitate the Minister, if to do short notice, we can do that. Okay. Okay. Thank you, members. We'll move on now, members, to item number 8, the horse racing bill, deliberations and clause-by-clause scrutiny. The committee will now commence its deliberations on the horse racing amendment bill. Depending on time and progress, we may proceed to formal clause-by-clause decision-making following deliberations. Okay. Members, you've been provided with the papers in the packet, page 233, to support our consideration, including a copy of the bill and a summary of the evidence from stakeholders. Barbara from the Bill's office is following proceedings and will be available to the committee to discuss any proposed amendments that may arise. I'd like to welcome officials from the Department Bill team who will be able to clarify any aspects of the bill for members to consider any suggestions. And we do have by Starleaf John Terrington, head of the horse racing bill team, Samantha Stewart, deputy principal, deputy head of the horse racing amendment bill team. And okay, members, okay that we start this part then? Okay. Okay, members, we'll consider clause 1 to begin with. Clause 1 proposes that the horse racing 1990 are to be amended by omitting named beneficiaries at Down Royal and Down Patrick Racecourse and replacing these with the definition of a horse race operator. This will enable the resumption of payments to both of the current operators at the race courses in County Down. Members will recall that the vast majority of respondents were supportive of this amendment, which will achieve the overarching aims of the bill. In the call for evidence, we did receive some feedback that may be useful to undertake a strategic review of the operation of the horse racing fund, to include other entities and consider them eligible to apply for fund payments. We also heard feedback that the fees charged to on and off course bookmakers should be reviewed to ensure that they are fair and proportionate to the level of income generated by activities at Down Royal and Down Patrick. Suggested members may wish to consider these measures by way of recommendations in this bill report, rather than seeking to frame these by way of specific amendments to this piece of legislation. Members, any comments they wish to make in relation to clause 1? Just indicate by the WhatsApp group here, and I'll be able to bring us in. Okay. So, members, in relation to clause 2, it carries forward the definition of a horse racecourse operator from clause 1 and changes the wording of the 1990 in order to be clearer and giving the flexibility to operators to submit financial statements jointly or independently. In our call for evidence, both of the current operators indicated they intend to submit financial statements independently and do not want to submit statements jointly. However, nothing in the bill will prevent the racecourses from submitting independent statements. Have members any questions in relation to clause 2?
Rosemary and John have questions.
Rosemary and John? Rosemary? Rosemary, have you a question, or John? And John? That was in the last time, was it?
No, it should be.
It's in the DAERA committee.
Okay, okay. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move on then to clause 3. Makes minor amendments to the 1990 order by omitting obsolete references and rules and bylaws of the corporation that are no longer required. Members, any commentary on clause 3? Just indicate on the WhatsApp. Okay. Clause 4 simply defines the 1990 order means the horse racing Northern Ireland order. Okay, if you have any comments on that, just let us know. Departmental colleagues have proposed an amendment to be inserted after clause 4 that has been brought forward given the legislation timetable. On the 1998 order, operators have to submit financial statements for the upcoming calendar year by the end of October. Okay.
Patsy has a question.
Yeah, Patsy?
Maybe you want to continue it all, go through it all there first. It's just not in this specific bit. I'm happy enough to wait till you're complete there.
Yeah, we'll go through the clause by clause, and maybe once there is anything, just indicate. I'm conscious we have went through this before, and we have had a good bit of scrutiny on it, but for the record, we're going through each clause. So, members, it's unlikely that this bill will be passed before before then, so a transitional amendment has been suggested to allow operators to submit financial statements 2 weeks after the bill is given royal assent. This will apply for 2022 only. Members, please fire it in. Clauses 5 and 6 are minor and inconsequential. If any questions on that, please raise them. So, this is the formal clause by clause decision making. In this case, members we're going to move on to the formal clause by clause. I'll ask members for your view on the clauses in the bill, and if there is a dissent of opinion on any of the clauses, we will go to a vote. I'm going to ask, is committee content with clause 1 as drafted? Yeah. Is committee content with clause 2 as drafted? Yeah. Bring up so you can see them.
Yeah, we're doing that now, Chair. Just want maybe, Chair, if I could just suggest maybe ask.
You can just indicate by on the screen, by nodding, I'll know, right? So, okay with clause 2, yeah? The nods there, yeah? Or thumbs up. Clause 3 is drafted, okay with clause 3? Yeah? Indicate, are we okay with clause 4? Yeah? The head's nodding there. And content with, are we content with the proposed amendment to be inserted after clause 4 is drafted? Am I content with clause 5? Yeah. And the committee content with clause 6 as drafted? Okay. And finally, members, can I please put to the question that the committee agrees the horse racing amendment bill?
Chair, if I could just seek a wee bit of clarity, please.
Yes, Patsy, absolutely.
Yeah, just on this before we move to that, and clearly that obviously is not my patch or anything like that, but there were issues raised by both Down Royal and Down Patrick race courses on the previous occasion whenever they presented before the committee. Could I ask just two things? One, does that resolve the payment issue to them now in completeness, entirety? And secondly, it seemed that they, because of the absence of the appropriate legislation, it seemed they had been due some monies. So is that retrospection or payment of monies going to be made to them as a consequence of this legislation, or something else that the department is doing running parallel with this?
Yeah. Could John or Samantha pick up on that, please?
Yes, can you hear me,
Yes,
Mr. Chair?
yes, John. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. This specific amendment that the Minister proposes to table at the next stage deals only with the year 2022, and to make sure that the bill coming in doesn't delay the ability for both racecourses to access the fund immediately on enactment. The issue of claims that Down Patrick in particular would have put to the department over the last couple of years isn't dealt with this insofar as that wasn't the aim of this. That isn't the aim of this particular transition provision. The matter as to whether there is scope to backdate, for want of a better term, the provisions to allow Down Patrick and Down Royal to access the fund for legitimate spend otherwise made in the previous year isn't dealt with this, but if the committee's minded, it is something that I'm sure we might be able to look at. I'm at this point not entirely sure of what can or can't be done drafting wise, but if that's something the committee would like us to look at, I'm sure we could, and it is something that clearly in parallel we would be discussing with the key stakeholders. As it would stand, the amendment that is there relates only to statements that would come in this year for the following year.
Okay.
Chair, I think it would be very helpful if indeed there could be something looked into, just based solely on what, if there's a reasonable just cause that there seemed to have been, based solely on what we were being told that they had missed out on funding that otherwise they would have received. If there is some mechanism or method of achieving that, or reinstating, or compensation is the wrong word, but reinstating a payment that should have been due to them and otherwise wasn't made to them. I think that in the interest of fairness, that every effort should be made to do that.
If I can, just by way of a little bit of background, I'm sorry I cut across German responding to that, but I mean, the reason why we couldn't was explained at the very onset of this exercise that Down Royal is unnamed, and therefore
yes,
we have no way and couldn't do anything about that. Downpatrick, then, in our assessment of the subsidy control rules in place, we couldn't pay them without being to pay the other. I guess the question is whether it's possible that once that position has been regularised by the bill and the renaming or the naming of the current operators of Down Royal, is there scope to allow that then the both would be able to access the money in retrospect, and that's there's the background to why we're where we are, and what we would need to do if that is possible legally, and whether, of course, the minister will be content to do that, obviously.
And that can be you can take a commitment to take a look at the possibility of that, John.
I think we certainly can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Come back to
that's
us
grand. Thanks, Chair.
And come back to us on as well, and report back to us on that.
Yes, we'll do.
Oh.
A useful thing to try and do before you finalise the committee finalise its report. So we'll work to that. Obviously, in terms of doing that, if it is deemed possible and the minister is content, obviously we're at the behest of Legislative Council in terms of actually drafting that. Obviously, would need to be done before consideration stage, but whether it's all in place before the committee reports, and for a chance for you to come back and revisit it on a separate occasion, time will tell. But I say we'll certainly look into it, see whether it's possible, see what's feasible, see what it would entail, and seek the view of the minister as to whether he's content to take it forward. Okay,
thank you, John. Look forward to that. Okay, okay, members. I want to thank members. I want to thank members for the time and consideration, and thank yourself, John, Samantha, as well, for your help and advice.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, I'm protecting Samantha as best as I can, because she's lost her voice this morning, so it's not that she wasn't willing to speak; she would have tried if necessary.
I think you've been doing a good enough job for advocating on our behalf, John. So thank you very much. So thank you. We'll see you again, John, Samantha. And I want to advise that the clerk will produce a draft bill report for the committee's consideration in due course. Okay, members, we're going to move on to item number 9, correspondence, page 254 of your packs. I'd like to draw attention to ministerial correspondence at page 311. The Minister has indicated his intention to bring forward, subject to executive approval, regulations to include the following organisations within the Rural Needs Act: Translink, NI Arts Council, NI Authority for Utility Regulation, NI Water, NI Communities Relations Council. Members, any questions or queries, please forward this to Nick by the close of play today. I'd like to draw your attention to a letter received from the RSPB, page 320, highlighting issues following the recent supplementary consent debate on this Environment Bill, DAERA's ability to provide advice to the OEP in respect of enforcement matters. The complete removal of the guidance power would be the most effective way to protect the OEP's independence. If this is not possible, the consideration should be given to strengthening the proposed scrutiny role for the Assembly in terms of DAERA's proposed advice to OEP. Members will recall that the recent amendments to the bill enable DAERA to provide advice to OEP, but that this is not binding, and that the Assembly will now have sight of guidance before it is issued. Members, any thoughts or views on this particular issue? Okay. Can I suggest that we forward RSPB's correspondence to the Minister and seek assurance that the Assembly's views and recommendations will be taken into account by DAERA before it issues any guidance to OEP? Members okay with that? Yeah. So members, page 3 of your packs is correspondence in the Department in relation to the Climate Change Committee's 2021 progress report. Annex A is a draft response as proposed by DAERA to the latest annual report and relevant recommendations pertaining to here. Members, if you have any comments or queries on the proposed response, please contact Nick by the close of play today. Members, okay if we action the remainder of the correspondence as suggested in the index page at page 254? Okay, members. Members, item number 10 is Forward Work Programme, page 324. An additional informal virtual meeting will take place today, just after this meeting, to progress the deliberations on the Climate Change No. 1 bill, depending on the progress that we make this morning, obviously. There will be a further 2 informal meetings on the 14th and 21st of October from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. Consider evidence from the agri-food and environmental sectors on the Climate Change No. 2 bill, as previously discussed and agreed. Are we okay with the Forward Work Programme? Just give a wee nod there. Yeah. Members, any other business you want to raise before we go to the closed session?
Chair.
Nick, yeah.
Chair.
Can I just draw your attention, Chair? There were 2 further items of correspondence in the tabled pack, just to confirm if members are content to action those as per the index.
Okay, members, happy enough for that? Okay, back here. Okay, members. So the next meeting will take place this day week, which is the 14th of October at 10 a.m. and it'll be a hybrid meeting streamed online on the Assembly website. So members, just stay on board because we'll move on to the closed session to look at the informal deliberations on Climate Change No. 1. So thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.